In this episode of Motive Garage presented by Sparesbox, we get JET200 up and running again. If you saw our last episode on JET200 for our 2023 World Time Attack build, you'll see that the car is pretty much mechanically together. In this episode, Rowan's coming over to start installing the wiring loom into the car, get the electronics all sorted so we can do our first startup. Which kind of isn't a first startup because the engine itself isn't brand new, but it does feel like it.
So pretty much from when you last saw me when I was here, we were just measuring everything up, getting everything sort of prepped and planned on the engine bay, just making sure everything was where it should be. You saw me getting my little cables out to try and make sure it was all 100%. Now we get to see what that looks like now that it's actually been put together. So we've made all our loom, we've got everything from what we had from that nylon rope and actually made it into a proper setup. We haven't gone too carried away with this, mainly because we don't need to. This is, at the end of the day, it is motorsport, but we don't need to get into the point where we're going to be running this thing close to water. It's not a rally car, it's not going to be running Dakar, it's out there at Eastern Creek. It's going to be doing some fast times, it's going to be hot, but that's as far as we need to take it. So we've got our harness pretty much all together, everything you've seen there. This is pretty much everything that was on the nylon setup. It's just all running ray cam, it's all concentric twisted. Everything's been neatened up and I mean, hopefully everything just works as it should. So we're looking to, obviously we'll always be upgrading. We start off with knowing what we have for this event, but then we say in the future want to start going to heavier traction control, want to add sensors, just want to add little bits and pieces to, you know, improve as the car improves, and then we can do it. So everything in the engine bay is pretty much going to stay the same. Everything that goes to the engine will pretty much be what it needs to be, other than a few things. Like we look in the future, we might go to say drive-by-wire. Those connectors have been added in. We've added a few more for like sensors if we need them. But other than that, that's all kept as pretty much as simple and neat as possible. And then everything beyond that point, as soon as it's a firewall, goes in a basic sort of just taped up, protected, but easy enough that if we need to open it up, we need to repair little bits on the loom, we need to change things, add things in, it's right there, it's accessible. We take out the dash panel and it's seconds as opposed to hours of trying to repair and patch up, which is important. So Haltech does a great job with this Nexus system where they have a provision so you can run 12 cylinders, 16 cylinders if you wanted to. We're running in a 4-cylinder. We don't need to use all of it, which is great. We have the capabilities as well with the way the system works that we can allocate other outputs and inputs to do things that originally weren't really possible to do up until the latest sort of technology and ECUs coming out, which means that we can start getting rid of connectors or little points of connections that we don't need because, well, we can use other things from other connectors to do that job, which is great. It keeps the wiring thinner, keeps it neater, and it just means that, you know, you've got less work to do at the end of it.
And we've ended up with a spare plug, is that right?
Yeah, there's completely, I didn't actually bring it here, there is a spare plug, completely free plug on the Nexus. So if we ever decide we want to add anything in the future, we've got that connector there ready to go. We run a separate loom for it, all done, easy. From when you last saw me here, I've only lost my mind a few times, a couple of late nights, and I'm talking like when you're on a roll with wiring, you keep going to hit that spot where you're like, okay, I'm done, I've lost my mind, but while you're on a roll, you're on a roll. This here is about close to 40 hours, just getting it all 100%. When you start going into the way you set it up with twisting and trying to do all your shrinking and sorts, prep work, planning, making sure everything's 100%, going over it 3 or 4 times, because once that's shut, that is shut. There's nothing more you can do on it. So you spend a lot of time making sure everything's 100% on it, trying to have everything neat and just trying to have it so it all rolls up and goes in a perfect ball so you can actually work with it as well. It's just time consuming. So we hit about 40 hours and we haven't got it in the car yet.
What time is it? Where are we up to?
Look, it's still technically Friday for the next 3 minutes, I guess. So we're pretty much at a point of almost being at starting. We're not going to do that until we have the engine guys here, but we're just going through pretty much just testing to make sure that everything's doing all of its jobs, really, just making sure the sensors are all calibrated, all the switches, all the inputs, all the outputs are all doing their thing. The dash is sitting there ready to go, the keypad's ready to go. Just making sure that when it comes to doing the startup, man, it's all 100% and we're looking pretty good. You want to make sure that everything is going to be doing 100% what it should be doing before you start putting on your boots, you start sealing up all your sensors, because once you're at that point, that's pretty much locked in. If you've got the sort of time to, you know, have that extra sort of couple of days just to go through and check it all, which I mean, sometimes you don't, you've got to just be 100% guaranteed that it's going to do your thing. But if you don't have to, you take the extra time to just make sure that you can have it all sitting there loose, you can calibrate it, you can check it, you can go through, make sure everything's 100% first, then you close it up, you seal it up, and you know what it is going to be now is what it's going to be on race day.
Comparison, wiring in this car now versus last year.
Totally different. I remember last year getting under here just trying to fix one simple wire. It was a nightmare. It was like playing, if you ever played Operation back in the day, you touched anything or bumped something, there was things sparking and arcing. It was probably good from back in the day when it was first done, but you know, it had a lot of hands on it. It's had a lot of people playing around with it, and it got to its point where it was just getting a little bit too tired. So now that we've got Haltech running all the setup, going through, having PDMs, it's just neatness awards a million times better. Like, it just looks so much cleaner. You're in one spot to do everything, and it's fantastic. Realistically, we are just getting the Nexus to control everything in the car. Bar a few things, we are running quite a few pump setups in there. We do usually keep them on relays. Usually use a Haltech solid state relays to have on there anyway. It just means that we can keep sure that what voltage or what amperage we are getting there is going to be as reliable. We are pushing a lot out of it. When you start going for that sort of 700 horsepower, you want to make sure that you are able to supply as much as it needs. And that way we can sort of keep everything that is coming from the PDM up to the front, up to where it needs to be, supplying all those things that, you know, it should be doing. Keeps it a lot neater and more organized as well. Means the wiring going to the back is a lot smaller. And when you are running this sort of new Haltech PDM system, it's just neat. Like, you can go underneath there and all you've got is one box to do everything. Everything's quiet, everything's efficient. You don't have ticks and clicks. If you want to try and find where the problem is, grab your laptop, you get out there, you have a check on it. If you can't figure it out on that, it'll come up on the dash. Everything is all right there in front of you. You don't need to try and start getting out test lights and multimeters and ripping out relays and fuses everywhere to find out which one's the actual problem, which one's the culprit. It's all right there in front of you. The ECU will start telling you, hey, this is the issue, this is where you should start looking. It's a perfect assistant.
All right, so what's the plan now? Just basically sensors, calibrating, ready for, and just getting it, I guess, ready for when Matt and Rob come over first start.
That's it, yeah, we're just going through just all the sensors that are in there. We're just matching all the part numbers up, just making sure everything's the ones they should be, so all the numbers are correct. So that means when we do first startup, we know our coolant temps are correct, we know our timing is going to be close to where it needs to be. We just know that everything's going to be doing what it should be doing. It's good to have these trial periods before you start the engine, so you can just make sure that, you know, everything's doing what it should be, everything's communicating, because like you said, once it's closed up, that's all buttoned up and done.
Well, with all of the wiring in the car and all the electronic systems tested, we've got a few more parts we need to put back on the car because they've come back from powder coating. So Rob Arbolino's on the way over, Rowan's on the way over, and we're going to get this car running again today. Let's go. When you change stuff, other things change. So the Ross balancer had a different size pulley, so we had to go find a new belt, but that 5PK 940 seems to fit fine, so that's all done. Just buttoning up a few things in here, so yeah, we're getting close. We're getting very close. In case you're wondering why I'm pointing a heat gun at my manifold, it's not to test the durability of the manifold, it's so that we could allocate EGT to the ECU to know which cylinder it is, because Ron rewired it all. Better to be safe than sorry and just ensure that it's the correct one, i.e. double check everything. So the first time you start up with the dry sump, you've always got to check your oil pressure and adjust it based on what it is. So you can either change your spring or you can obviously screw it in and increase the base pressure on it as well. So at the moment we're going to try screwing in the bolt that's on the back side of the spring, increase the base pressure, see what pressure we get, and then basically from there you just have to, well, test and see really. So what oil you run, what clearances you run, obviously help determine the pressure and then obviously the spring that you've got in it.
If you start it now, it'll be about 105.
You trying to get more?
A little bit, yeah.
Just because it's stone cold still. 105, tell me.
I say we put in a 70 to 110 psi range spring and adjusted it, and now we've got 105 psi at idle. Basically when the oil is cold, it's super thick. So our GTR, for example, has about 125, 130 psi at idle cold. So with this car, we knew we wanted over 100 psi with cold oil at idle, and now we've got that with just over 105 psi at idle. If we work out we need more, we won't really know until it goes on the dyno and starts doing power runs, but that's a good start. At least we know we're in the safe zone to get started. So yeah, that's it. So one of the last things I need to button up on the car before it goes to the dyno is just mounting the dash and the keypad. So I don't want to get rid of my original instrument, I guess, back plate here because it's already molded to the floor on the dash properly. The dash can go over the top. So I'm just drilling holes for the keypad and the center hole to fit the wiring through, and I'll mount that on. I've already mounted the Haltech 1.25 inch cage mount, which then has this bracket to put the dash right here. You can see it perfectly through the steering wheel. So yeah, we'll get all that set up, but we're not going to put the dash in yet because we want to get the car tuned and running perfectly before we put the dash in. Why? Well, with no dash in, it's easy for Rowan to access any of the wiring. So once we know the car runs, that's when we start cable tying all the wiring out of the way, put the dash back in and finish it off. Let's do it. Is one of my favorite things to do with a new setup in a car, and that is set up the dash how you want it. So the colors, what information it shows, what each page has, etc. I've got my preferences, other people have theirs. The main Haltech screen is probably my favorite for driving, but I like to have a diagnostic screen and I like to have another race option that's a little bit simpler as well. So it's good to have a few options. So I'm going to set all that up now and get it going. Well, first startup went really well. We didn't have any leaks, but we did need to change the spring in the dry sump pump to get the pressure to where we wanted. And basically after a couple of heat cycles, we now have the car ready to go to the dyno. So make sure you subscribe and check out our next episode where we start making some jam.